Welcome to Vintage Firearms with LT Arms. In this episode, we discuss the life of American author and big game hunter Robert Ruark.
If ever there was a man who could be called the godfather of safari for American hunters, it would be Robert Ruark. A famed American newspaper columnist, author, world traveler, and bon vivant, Ruark left a stamp on the world of outdoor literature that is timeless. Robert Ruark was born December 29, 1915 in Wilmington, North Carolina. His parents, being somewhat unreliable and prone to bouts of alcoholic depression and drug abuse, left Ruark to be raised largely by his maternal grandparents. His well-read and mentoring grandfather, Captain Ned Adkins, was an old sailor, hunter, and fisherman who kept young Robert busy with outdoor pursuits. These childhood experiences would figure significantly in Ruark's life, as we will see. Ruark was a highly intelligent child who, when not hunting upland birds and waterfowl, spent his time alone and reading books. He graduated high school early at age 15, just as Captain Adkins died, and immediately enrolled in the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, finding journalism courses to his liking. He graduated in 1935. After working as a reporter for a pair of small-town North Carolina newspapers, in 1936 Ruark made his way to Washington, D.C., and found employment as a copy boy at the Washington Daily News, where his managing editor was Ernie Pyle. Within just a few months, he was the paper's top sports reporter, his rise nothing less than meteoric. As a co-worker at the paper noted, Ruark was brash, ambitious, cocky, fast, and good. In 1938, Ruark married Virginia Webb, a Georgetown University graduate from a notable D.C. area family with a career as an interior designer. When America entered World War II, Ruark was commissioned as an ensign in the Navy and sailed for 10 months in the Atlantic and Mediterranean, commanding a gunnery crew on a freighter delivering materiel. Upon his return at war's end, Ruark joined the Scripps Howard Newspaper Alliance and United Features Syndicate at $125 per week. Wishing to quickly distinguish himself and climb into a higher income bracket, he figured the best way was attacking convention and establishment. He wrote a scathing assessment of American women's fashion to see if he could get some attention. It worked. The backlash was loud and long. Over 2,500 letters to the editor poured in, and his popularity skyrocketed. He was soon making $50,000 a year when the average American salary was $3,000 per year, and was syndicated in hundreds of newspapers across the country. Ruark was off and running, and as one of America's most popular columnists, he thoroughly enjoyed his fame. His stinging wit and gift for expressing aversion in a humorous fashion cemented his reputation, aiming his commentary at virtually everything held dear in American culture. His most popular assaults were collected in two books, I Didn't Know It Was Loaded in 1948 and One for the Road in 1949. He ultimately published over 4,000 columns. He was also contributing articles to Saturday Evening Post, Esquire, True, Argosy, and other popular magazines of the era. In 1947, he published his first novel, Grenadine Etching, a humorous spoof of popular historical romantic novels of the day. In 1952, Ruark was living the fast and wild New York City lifestyle. He and wife Jenny had a Manhattan penthouse and a regular table at noted bars and restaurants like Toots Shor's, the Stork Club, and the 21 Club. A heavy drinker and 3-pack-a-day smoker, the lifestyle began to wear on him, and his doctor recommended taking a year off to rest, recuperate, and sober up before he died young. He'd always dreamed of going to Africa, inspired by the tales his grandfather had told him all those years ago. In June of 1952, Ruark booked a 2-month trip in Tanganyika and Kenya with Karen Downey Safaris. It would change his life. Having never shot at anything but birds with shotguns, he had some learning to do. His safari included plains game such as impala and gazelle, the larger antelopes such as kudu and eland, along with dangerous game such as Cape buffalo, rhino, and elephant. He outfitted for the trip with 4 rifles: Winchester Model 70 and 375 H&H, a Remington and 30-06, a Wesley Richards double rifle and 470 Nitro Express, and a Winchester Model 70 and 220 Swift for small varmints and such. He and Jenny arrived in Nairobi and immediately visited the tailor to have all their safari clothes made. They made their way to the New Stanley Hotel while they waited for their professional hunter, Harry Selby, to return from an assignment. Selby was just beginning his career, and the next 60 days would change his life as well. At all events, the safari was a rousing success, and Ruark was so moved by his experience, he wrote a book about it titled Horn of the Hunter, published in 1953. Amazingly, he wrote the manuscript in just 1 month. Even today, 70 years on, it is widely regarded as perhaps the finest book on the subject ever produced. Harry Selby, Ruark's professional hunter on the trip, figures prominently in the book. As soon as it was published, he was booked out 5 years in advance and spent the rest of his long life as one of Africa's most famous professional hunters. Selby passed in 2018. The book also proves that Ruark did not take his doctor's orders to heart. His descriptions of the amounts of booze consumed on the safari are staggering, and the cases of gin, wine, and beer they packed must have taken up a lot of truck bed space. The next year, in February 1953, Field & Stream magazine began running a monthly piece from Ruark under the heading The Old Man and the Boy. These columns told the stories of a 1920s youngster in coastal North Carolina taken under the wing of his wizened grandfather, the Old Man. The boy learns about hunting, fishing, and life through the Old Man's philosophical ruminations while afield. The column ran for 106 episodes, ending in 1961. Most of the columns were collected into 2 books, The Old Man and the Boy and The Old Man's Boy Grows Older. They remain in print still today, a testimony to their enduring popularity, but also the simple fact that these stories are some of the finest outdoor literature of the 20th century. Amazingly, Ruark was paid $1,500 per column back then, an equivalent of $17,000 today. Ruark was famed for his lavish lifestyle, and it's a good thing it was well funded. Upon returning to New York from Africa, the Ruarks had a revelation and decided the city lifestyle and American income taxes were no longer tenable. They bought an apartment in London and a lovely old property on the Mediterranean coast in Palamos, Spain, north of Barcelona, which they transformed into a magnificent home. Close proximity to Africa allowed Ruark to do at least 10 more safaris with Selby, the taxidermy from which graced the walls of the Spanish home. Ruark's biggest book was a 1955 novel titled Something of Value, a historical fiction treatment of the Mau Mau emergency in Kenya. The book was an immediate sensation, a bestseller that included graphic depictions of the violent atrocities that befell British colonists. The novel was quickly optioned for a screenplay, and the resulting 1957 film featured Rock Hudson and Sidney Poitier as the 2 main characters. Ruark documented his second safari not with his typewriter but with cameras, making a film called Africa Adventure. It was popular during screenings in the 1950s, then was lost until an original reel surfaced and it was converted to DVD. We will add a link above the comments where you can see the film in its entirety. Ruark followed up Something of Value with a sequel titled Uhuru, the Swahili word for freedom, published in 1962. In the book, Ruark said some things about a Kenyan politician that were borderline libelous, in addition to some points with which the British took umbrage, and he was forced to quickly flee the country. He was never able to return, doing his last few safaris in other parts of Africa. The copious booze and hard living finally caught up with Robert Ruark July 1, 1965. He'd been ill and flew to London from Spain to see his doctor. Cirrhosis of the liver caused massive internal bleeding, and he died in a London hospital aged just 49. His body was returned to Spain, and he is buried near his beloved home in Palamos. Virginia died just 18 months later, aged 49, also from complications of the lifestyle. 2 more books were published posthumously. The Honey Badger is a novel, but in all practicality is not a biography of Ruark's last years. Use Enough Gun is a compendium of various hunting stories and articles from Ruark's career. While his legacy remains in the books previously mentioned, in reality, Ruark was a bit of an enigma and is largely forgotten. For those wishing to know more of the man, there are a few notable biographies that will help shed further light on this most mercurial of American writers and outdoorsmen.